Mike, thanks for joining us today. Mike, I just wanted to tell me more about your role in Aurora and how you guys are using and technology to enable your city's progress.
Well, thanks, Andrew, for having me today. So, in terms of Aurora's strategy as it relates to kind of the technology procurement piece, especially from the information technology division, one of the first things that Mayor Irving had mentioned to me is, Mike, I want you to build a strategy that allows the city of Aurora to be a world-class technology innovator in the region and in the state. One of my first challenges or my realization was the fact that technology changes so fast, right? And with the current commodity-based procurement process, I was like, there's no way we're going to be able to be agile and flexible to do this. So I started kind of looking out in the landscape, seeing what options were there. And that's when we met at the first
Right.
conference, and we started to, talk about, technology procurement and how Marketplace.city could help enable the city of Aurora. And from there, it was this relationship, and we talked about doing that first pilot, right, back in 2019 until 2020. And from there, it led us to where we are today in this full-blown contract in terms of Marketplace being a strategic partner for the city of Aurora to manage our technology procurement going forward, right?
So talk a little bit more about the what you've seen in the past with the rigidity of procurement in some of the rules and why being agile really helps you guys make changes as your strategic tech plan evolves year over year.
Right. So, coming into this role back in June 2017, and relatively new to the public sector. Previously, as you know, I worked in Fortune 100 companies in the financial services sector, also IT and telecom, and also the Department of Defense. But as we know, technology changes so rapidly. And I noticed that in the public sector space, in the local government space, that it was taking somewhere from 8 to 10 months to complete one RFP.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, oh my God, by the time that RFP is done, the requirements have completely changed. The technology has probably changed 3 or 4 versions. I was like, there's no way we can operate like this. We need to be able to go through that vetting process, validation, bidding, procurement, and identifying those different products within like 4 to 6 weeks on average, right? That's the only way we're going to be able to be competitive in this market, especially if we want to be a world-class city and consider ourselves a smart city, right? So that challenge there for me was like, how do we get over that, right? And identifying those challenges was kind of the first step in that journey to where we are today.
And how talk about it in the sourcing space. What was the sourcing aspect of the procurement process like? Prior to this, when you were first coming in, how did you start when you're like, we need a new system, we need some new technology?
Well, the first thing that I was like, walked in and I saw the process, I was like, man, this is about 30 years old, the way that they're doing the technology procurement here. And it wasn't that they were doing technology procurement, it's like they were doing all procurement.
Yep.
They just bundle into one big basket. And it was all commodity based.
Right.
I'm not buying salt, I'm not buying cement, I'm not buying a widget. I'm buying technology, services, and solutions. That's a whole different dynamics, right? The whole business model, the contracting model is not the same. I don't want to have to spend capital expenditures to buy software, hardware, to modernize my infrastructure. I prefer to go out and have a managed service where I lease that so I can forecast my operational expend over 3 to 5 years. As you know, Andrew, better than anyone, when you start to try to budget for capital expenditures for infrastructure upgrades, the budget gets tight, right?
Yep.
And it's very difficult to predict that, right?
So we talk about the relationship a lot as a partnership, right? And I know you do that with not just Marketplace, but also with the other vendors. But what does the Marketplace partnership, the procurement innovation, free up your other resources to do? Free up not just the IT team, but other resources across the city.
Well, in terms of resources, I'd look at it in terms of like 4 buckets, right? People, processes, partners, and products and services, right? So in terms of people, it frees up man hours, right? I mean, we have the data to show that, right? In 2019, when we did the pilot, we freed up 1,000 man hours of our procurement team in the city of Aurora, right? In terms of processes, Marketplace came in, they put in their Clearbox process, which established a baseline process for the city of Aurora in terms of how technology procurement is being done. So it created this transparency and accountability, which aligned to our local ordinance and our procurement rules, right? So, and from a city council perspective and the mayor's perspective, that's great for business, right? We can take that out to our constituents and say, we're being fiscally responsible. In terms of partner, it gained us partners, the Marketplace team, yourself, Chris Foreman, and we have to give a special shout out to Kimberly Goldman, our customer success manager at the city of Aurora. And at the same time, it allows us to deploy technologies, products, and services, especially during the time after we did that pilot, where we were able, well, it was at the onset of COVID, when the pandemic hit, right? And we were able, and if I get the numbers wrong, please correct me, we were able to deploy about 14.
I think it was 14 in the first year,
14 different RFPs in the first year during the pandemic. It was unheard of, right? And it kind of set the gold standard in terms of how technology procurement should be done in a municipality for not just Illinois, but actually for the nation, right?
Yeah, and we talk about, yes, there's innovation in the procurement process, but also bringing the data forward, right? Like it's hard to make choices and move forward and progress in absence of the data. So we talk upfront the sort of market landscape, bringing it in. How does bringing the data sort of early in the process to know what's on the market and what other cities are using, what pricing is available, how does that affect sort of your team in sort of making their plans and sort of moving forward?
Right, and I know you probably heard me say this before, Andrew, but data is a new currency, right? And it's like, if you have the data and you can gain insights from that, right? That's powerful, right? It allows us, again, to be agile. It allows us to show that, hey, we've done our due diligence, right? It allows us to be fiscally responsible, and it allows us to be transparent in everything we do. And that data, having that information then allows us to go out and share that with other municipalities, with other state organizations, right? Non-for-profits, educational institutions, right? To collaborate with them to say, hey guys, we're all in this, this thing together. How can we collaborate? How can we cooperate? And how can we work together to deliver these products and services for our constituents, not just in the city, but the state and also in the nation. So, having that information, like you said, that data repository is gold. I mean, it's currency, right? You don't have to go back and basically redo the process. Why go reinvent that wheel, right? You just keep it housed and you share that information.
Yeah, I think the most obvious and easy to capture up front, right? The resource savings and the time savings. But we always have the third one being real cost savings to the cities, right? Can you talk about an example where where our project sort of delivered true cost savings of what otherwise would have happened?
Right, and actually I would add a fourth one in there to save me some headaches as well.
That's probably true as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of cost savings, if I recall correctly, when we did the pilot in 2019 to 2020, I think the actual contract savings totaled somewhere about $500,000.
Yep, that's
just for that pilot for over 14 RFPs.
Yep.
That was unheard of, right? And we went back and showed those tangible savings to our mayor, to our city council, right, to our constituents, and we said, you know what? We want to take those contract savings and invest that money into other modernization projects, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's innovation, whether it's modernization, or if it's the people, the human capital that exists in the city of Aurora. One of the big things where I always focus on is like showing those cost savings and those cost avoidance and being able to say, you know what, I want to take that money and reinvest it on other things, because I don't, and it's my philosophy that IT should not be looked at as a cost center, right? We should be looked at a revenue generating center that provides value added services for the departments, for the divisions, for our citizens. But if we can show that tangible savings, avoidance, and the data substantiates that, you can't argue with the data, right? Right?
Yeah, so you talked about the headaches and some of the data downstream. Everyone can't be a technology expert, right? That's not practical, really, not in any business, but certainly not in state and local government. We've heard a lot of the process and the data and being able to summarize, show it, making it easier for other stakeholders and other departments, other Aurora staff, and ultimately City Council. You just talk about how that process has made the I guess an easier working relationship with the other managers of the city and other stakeholders of the city.
Absolutely, because one of the things, if you look at the city of Aurora, the IT department's vision, I mean, we're actually focused on being the IT strategic business partner for the city department's division and also our constituents. So we're the advisors for any technology investments, whether it's hardware, software, modernization. So if I'm saying that I'm going to be your partner, Andrew, right? You want to say, okay, show me the return on investment, but show me the data to basically to substantiate that, right? So using that data and going back to our partners to say, hey, listen, we ran this RFP, or City of Chicago ran this, Kansas City ran this, Kansas City, here's the data sets, right? Your data points to say, here was that whole procurement process, here's the bid, here is the cost, here are the different vendors, right? And being able to show that there's a track record, right? It allows us to kind of gauge where we should be at in that process in terms of price, cost, right? In terms of scope, right? Scheduled deployments, implementation, right? Value-added services, X, Y, Z, right? So using that information to go back to basically come back to your partners and say, hey, this is what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's what we think you're asking, right? Just to navigate and basically say, okay, I think we should be here. Now let's move forward. Mr. Business Owner or Mr. Department Head or Mr. Division Head, hey, are you comfortable with that? Yes, we are. Let's move forward.
Right? And technology, as we've talked about many times, it's not all back office things of Microsoft Exchange and switches and infrastructure, right? I mean, the growing spend for state and local technology is really in those departments, in those agencies, right? Depending on the setup. Aurora has done over the last year, and it continues to do a lot of projects in the public safety space. Some very big, long-term investment stuff that's probably not going to be switched out, on a frequency basis. Like from a next-gen 911 or a police body cams and digital evidence management, knowing that's when you're talking about police leadership or public safety leadership, that's not something where their area of expertise is going to be technology. Talk about how you worked within the process with them and sort of allowed the city to get real comfortable with these big commitments, right, to new systems that are over 5 and sometimes 10-year arcs.
Right. When we talk about public safety, not just in the city of Aurora, but any city or state entity, it always becomes priority number one. For any mayor or governor that you meet, public safety is one of his key objectives in terms of making sure that, my city or my state is safe, right? Because, it basically promotes economic development. It creates, it helps promotes tourism, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But when you're dealing with public safety, typically, traditionally, that I've seen in the public sector space is they've had decentralized ITs. And a lot of times the public safety command staff drives the need. And they said, this is what we want. But it's not necessarily what they need, right? Because they don't understand technology. They understand policing.
Keeping people safe.
Keeping people safe. Now let IT be that business partner to help you to understand and translate those actual requirements. And one of the main things is they'll just say, we want to buy this, right? But a lot of times you might need to take a step back from the tree so you can see the forest. And if you're talking about a big capital expenditure, it's like, do we really need to buy that infrastructure? Right. Maybe we should look at going to an OpEx model and say, maybe we should just lease that service, right? Because again, if we go back to the ever-changing need or landscape of technology, it's so rapidly evolving. why would I want to go buy a car that's going to depreciate at least 75% of its value within the first month, right?
Yep.
Right? So those are the things that, the public safety officers are not charged to understand that. And that's why you have your IT department and you have partners like Marketplace.city to kind of help you to understand what's the best route to take on that journey, right? So I think that's a very important aspect.
Yeah. As a, not only a technology innovation leader, but also a civic leader, what are the best practices you've seen from this relationship, this partnership that you would want to pass on to your peers and to other sort of leaders across the country?
Right. I think that's a great question, Andrew. And I think it's one of the things that we had discussed in the very beginning. It's like, where's really the value add? I mean, there's the obvious value add that we talked about, like man hours, cost savings, cost avoidance, and things of that nature. But again, going back to the data and the collaboration and cooperation at the city level, at the regional level, the counties, the state levels, and also on the national levels, right? And one of I think the beautiful things, and it's a very simple thing that Marketplace and I think the city of Aurora implemented, is that piggybacking clause, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, right? If we know that the city of Aurora just went through a very comprehensive process in terms of police body cameras, and now we know that Chicago is going to go through that, or a neighboring municipality in the next state, why go through and do all that additional homework when you have that data in a repository? Again, that data is currency, right? It's saving time and saving money, right? And being fiscally responsible and showing that to your city council and your constituents, I think that's really where the value add is, right? And I think that's where you start to kind of expand that model, right? Because there's not a lot of municipalities out there that's doing it, not that I know of,
No.
So, if we can be that leader in that space, working with innovative and creative partners like Marketplace.city, I think it's a win-win for everybody, right? It is a bit of unconventional thinking,
Sure.
right? And it's not very common space to municipalities. But, crisis, it doesn't wait for, governments to catch up, right? So, I always say never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's where we are today, right?
And ultimately, the payback is you get to learn from other cities too, and eventually, as they do something in a space where you need to use it, you have that value and that data piece. Talk two more quick things on the citizen engagement and how technology needs to continue to meet citizens and residents and businesses, where they are, and how important that is for government to evolve and sort of knowing that the tools that are in every one of your residents' hands on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And again, this is another thing that the pandemic has pretty much proven to us, and I love to use the example of the pandemic because it's a living, breathing case study to say why we need to be more innovative in many different areas. But today we're talking about, technology procurement. But when you start to talk about citizen engagement, which again is one of the mayor's pillars, citizen engagement, how do we empower our constituents so they feel like they're engaged as part of the civic process that the city of Aurora has? And it's a very tricky space, right? A lot of people look at it and it's like, we don't want the public too involved in the decision-making process because it hinders the process, right? We're here and we're chartered to basically support the city. So it's a fine balance how you manage that, right? But we need to provide the tools and the resources to the constituents so they feel like they're involved and they're part of that decision-making process. And we've used some technology, which I'll leave anonymous, that uses artificial intelligence platform that goes out and does sentiment analysis. One of the major, responsibilities of a city or municipality is public hearings, right? And being able to, have these different resolutions and these items on the agenda where publics can come in and voice their opinions, right? But the city itself, the mayor's executive team and the legislators and the councilmen and women, they need to understand what's actually going on out there in the community. What is the pulse? What is the sentiment, right? But a lot of times you'll have, typically that I've seen in my, short time in city government, you'll have like maybe just a handful of people that really attend these city council meetings. Now, with the pandemic, a lot of that's transferred over to Zoom,
Sure.
and things of that nature. So engagement has increased, which is a good thing, right? But how do you really gauge the sentiment of the community, right? You got to have those tools out there that go out and scrape social media, right? Because most of the good data is really on social media, whether, you agree or disagree or you're indifferent about it.
Yep.
You can get a pulse of what the community's talking about before it gets to the mayor's desk to say, I don't agree with this, or I have an opinion, or I'd like to voice my concerns around this. If you have that data again, then you can be preemptive and proactive with those different issues that are being presented to the city council and be prepared to address those concerns of the constituent. So there are tools out there that are available for citizen engagement. But again, going back to the whole marketplace process, we've gone through that process. Now let us share some of the learnings that we've had with the other municipalities in the region and the states and nationwide. But,
all right, last one on your favorite topic. Where's the city of Aurora headed? What's the next wave of innovation and technology that you can share?
Man, wow, that's a loaded question.
It is.
With my philosophy, one of my guiding principles is around being agile and focused on smart sourcing, right? I'm a big advocate of using a blend of public-private resources to drive innovation. And honestly, I'll be quite candid. I don't think the government does a good job of driving innovation. I think we do a horrible job of it, right? One thing we do a good job of is convening people, right? I think we need to lean on that public-private partnership models a lot more, creating strategic partnerships with startups like Marketplace.city, and let the startups like yourself come up with the ideas to help drive innovation, help to streamline process, and to make the city better, right? Because we're a government. And, the quintessential thing you take away from being a government, it's bureaucratic.
Right.
It's slow. That's what governments are for. They're there to put checks and balances in place to make sure that we safeguard the citizens' best interests. But when you're talking about innovation, you can't be moving that slow, right? So it needs to be a balance. So, that public-private partnership, I think, is kind of the new model going forward into, this fourth industrial revolution, where we're talking about cyber space and where we're talking about artificial intelligence, because the landscape's changing. It's not physical anymore. It's very virtual. And if the government can't stay up, which we know from history it cannot,
right?
Local government, right? Then we need to address that. Let's address the elephant in the room and say, what are the options that we need to do to make ourselves sustainable?